there's nothing like a selective. Well, they say there is, but it doesn't act like a.
There actually is. They just don't. They don't work properly.
It doesn't act like a SERM.
I look like some kind of comic book villain with this beard. I was just looking at myself. I was like, what is this guy?
Yeah, you could be like the guy in the 5 rings, right? What is it? Or the 10 rings, the Marvel character villain.
It's true. Anyways, Steve, on that topic that you were mentioning earlier, I have a suspicion that once you have like hyperplasia of fat cells, or even the de novo synthesis of fat cells in the liver, that it's nearly impossible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it might be hard to resolve indefinitely. So that's why I'm, with all my research and months spending on liver talks, that updated book that goes over all the liver studies on what is it, PubMed? Yeah, liver talks. I linked it in the previous video, so I'll send you a link also. It's got like everything, and it keeps getting updated. So I spent like 4 months there to research, and you just get more confused because there's certain combinations which work, some which didn't. And then they say vitamin E treatment, when you discontinue it, your liver enzymes go up again, which didn't happen in my case. So I'm just going to starve it.
So I've researched that, by the way, the vitamin treatments, because I was reading about cirrhosis, particularly, not NAFLD, cirrhosis and NASH. Specifically NASH. I was studying NASH, and I looked over this paper that was comparing various approaches to it. And I remember they had vitamin E in there, and it had some studies showing results for NASH.
Yeah, but some didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I have comparative with vitamin E and metformin together, separately, and placebo, right? And then there's another Pegla something. I completely glanced out. Also did, but you got to remember, most of these studies were performed in people who are obese, diabetes, non-active lifestyles. So a lot of these things don't even apply to me because I was physically active. Emphasis on was, because I stopped training now. I'm not going to do training while fasting, mimicking diet, but I am doing 30 minutes of cardio per day for cardiovascular endurance. Yeah.
So quickly, just for the audience to know, I have two or three videos on livers in my channel, but one of them is about it reviews these different studies about the vitamin E, about bile acids and different kinds of treatments for NASH. One of the videos. So if you search liver on my channel, you'll come across them. But my feeling is,
I watched them all, dude.
Having had NAFLD for very many times in my life, beginning with alcoholic fatty liver disease, I think originally in my early 20s. Now, whenever I gain much body fat, like as you can tell right now, I just gained body fat because I'm bulking.
You're celebrating.
No, compassionately bulking for my wife because she's pregnant.
All right. Yeah, so she doesn't feel left. You don't feel left out, right?
Yeah, exactly. So but the point is, whenever I gain some body fat, I will immediately notice a deposition of visceral fat as compared to what I would get naturally when I was 15 years old or so. I would get more subcutaneous fat because I'm naturally an obese person. So when I was 15, I was fat, but I didn't have visceral fat. It was different, the kind of fat. And ever since I first developed the NAFLD properly, whenever I gain fat, it can quickly, I can notice it. It's visceral fat, and quickly my blood sugar will change to reflect that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Very quickly.
I don't notice any visceral fat. Even when I was at my heaviest, I could do the same vacuum, and on the ultrasound, it doesn't really show up. So every time I did my ultrasounds, I would ask, is there the space between the organ, is it normal? Yes. That's the only way to detect it, really, unless you do maybe an MRI. But, man, those things are so expensive, dude.
Yes, very expensive.
And then I was surprised. I was thinking, okay, I want to resolve my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's still diagnosed. I can do an MRI or a CT scan to get it diagnosed a little bit more in depth. But I can also buy this elliptical for the same price. So I bought an elliptical. So now I got an elliptical.
But not a CT scan. CT scan's too much radiation for the liver. You don't want to do that too often.
Yeah, maybe I didn't. MRI, I think they recommended an MRI.
Yeah.
They got these lists, of examinations that you can do. I just briefly looked over it, and one was like in the 5 digits. So it's like, okay, this is Thai baht, not in US dollars. And then, the other ones were like 2 digits, so like a couple times, like maybe $200, $300.
Speaking of which, you guys have heard that Dave Palumbo has a thyroid cancer, huh?
Yeah.
So he has this form of thyroid cancer that has tripled in its incidence since the 70s. I forgot what it's called. Starts with a P. It's pretty interesting. I
He
watched
just got like a lobe in his. So I also did an ultrasound on my thyroid, and there was also a very small nodule, like a millimeter or something.
Really?
How do you find out? Did he just have, protrusion in the
No,
neck area?
he did regular ultrasounds.
No, he did.
Oh.
He was doing an ultrasound, I think, of his coronary. He has a
All right, yeah.
one of his arteries is like about to split. So he was doing some kind of scan of the artery, and they saw the thyroid, which is just above it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
good
but
catch.
Dave has been struggling with heart stuff for a while. That's why he's got a pacemaker installed and went to the John of God guy. I've been following RX since the beginning. So he went to all these specialists right before he started really focusing on his size and started to slim down.
That's true.
It's scary, man. So that's why I'm trying to resolve this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as fast as possible.
Well,
because this.
I mean, don't put yourself. That's not the same. I mean, it's it's not
the same.
scary.
No, it's obviously not the same. But
don't worry.
Like when you there's something not 100% inside, and you know it, and you're trying to resolve it, but it's going very slow. I'm like, I want to get over this. But not because I want to get back on cycle, but because I want it out of my body.
I think almost all people that are on cycle that are bodybuilding have it. And I think at least 40% of Americans have it. It's more a sort of thing that, you're talking about almost 1 in 2 people have it that are adults in the US.
You know how much blood work I got over the last 4 months after being open about it? Unbelievable how many people struggle from this.
Yeah, everyone, a lot of people have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Yeah, and it's hard to tell, obviously, when you see blood work because you see muscular people with high ALT and AST. And so, in general,
gamma GT and everything else is in range, so it's ultrasound. So I'm sure the stock value of ultrasounds is going up now.
That's true. Yeah, I guess so.
So for the thyroid thing, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just interested as far as like the progression of a thyroid cancer. Is that typically more prevalent in somebody who has like an autoimmune Hashimoto's thyroiditis kind of thing, or is it kind of just luck of the draw, or how do you kind of predict if you're at higher risk other than my mom and grandparents had it or whatever?
High TSH.
Yeah.
So like stress on your thyroid feedback system would indicate that you have, so even though that's like saying you have if you have a high LH and FSH that you're going to get testicular cancer. Like how do you
having high estradiol
adenoma.
Is that the same thing though? Because it's like TSH, it's just saying you don't have an adequate output of the hormones, so that somehow equates to your whole system is more stressed, so you're going to develop something.
I think so, because you're taxing that organ, and because probably from a micronutrient deficiency or growth hormone use, which also speeds up thyroid conversion, and you see also weird readings on the THH. A lot of people don't take their supplemental T4.
Hypothetically, would it not imply that replacement therapy would attenuate or lower your risk of cancer development?
So this is you bring up another concern, right? So I was thinking about this personally with very little knowledge of thyroid biology. And actually, just before we started recording, I was actually reading about thyroid cancer on Google Scholar because I was curious. I was wondering if taking replacement thyroid makes the thyroid inactive, and if that inactivity could potentially cause thyroid cancers also. Because remember, Dallas had thyroid cancer, and so I was just wondering, maybe that's a bit of it. And then I also wondered, why is the TSH being high causing thyroid cancer? Is it causing them, or is it a proxy measure? Like, is it a symptom of a disease state in the thyroid, and that's why TSH is high? And or is it the actual overactivity, like Steve was saying, which could be enough? So, for example, women with high estradiol levels, which means by nature their breasts would also grow more, tend to get breast cancers, right? Men with, you would imagine men with higher androgenic signaling also are more likely to get prostate hyperplasia and things like that. So there may be diseases of certain organs where when they're hyperfunctional, they end up with disorders in the long term. My curiosity was this: could we potentially research the subject, and then would it be such that one could make a video that if your metabolism is better, you're more likely to get thyroid cancer? That's what my curiosity is. Like, are thinner people more likely to get thyroid cancer?
I would think in general, thinner people would be less likely. But that would just be speculation based on overall health metrics being better rather than the fact that they're skinny,
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But
what you see with people that use growth hormone, but without proper thyroid supplement, T4 supplementation or micronutrient intake, that their T4 levels decrease, their TSH shoots up, and if they don't address it, the TSH stays, thyroid stimulating hormone stays elevated for such a long time, and they keep forcing the growth hormone in because we want to get leaner, even though they're metabolically slightly impaired, because when the T4 depletes, the T3 also depletes, and this could take months, but I've seen it so many times on blood work, and I'm sure when you keep instructing the thyroid gland, like, hey, produce more T4, but there's no building blocks to actually produce this. There's not enough iodine in the system. Because T4, as the name implies, it has 4 iodine molecules, and then T3 only has 3 because it goes through the deiodinase enzyme. So iodine is cleaved off for it to be active. So let's say you don't get so much micronutrients. That's why they put the iodine in the table salt to prevent goiter. So I think if you're chronically stimulating this thyroid conversion, and perhaps some of the other PEDs that we take do that as well, maybe that would result in this high TSH. And I've seen it many times on blood work. That's why I released all these videos. I said, guys, focus on your electrolyte intake and get that iodized table salt, because Himalaya pink salt is not a good source of iodine. And whatever iodine is inside is oxidized.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's been exposed to the air. And they even put it on the tables or on the Himalaya pink salt nowadays. Said, listen, this is not a good source of iodine.
Exactly.
So all those hippies said, yes, Himalaya pink salt is the best salt ever. It's a good way to get goiter if you're taking that with your exogenous growth hormone.
So even the one that says iodized right on the label, like from, I guess you don't have Costco where you live, but I'm thinking of those big, Leo, I don't know if you've seen those giant Himalayan pink salt containers from Costco that say iodized right on the front. And it's something that, like Stan Efferding, for example, highly recommends dousing your food in this stuff because of all the iodine content and, obviously the electrolytes too. But you're saying that is void essentially of iodine, even though it says iodized.
Talking about normal pink salt, not the
normal pink salt. Yeah, so they probably have specialized iodized pink salt, and I would usually go with. No, I've never seen iodized pink salt either, but
go grab it right now.
Yeah, okay, sure, show it off. Thanks, babe. Get my coffee delivered.
Yeah,
Cheers,
again,
guys.
for the audience to know that wood stuff, that's just a background. He just puts it up there. It's not real.
It's a green screen.
So it says iodized right on the front underneath ground Himalayan pink salt, and then underneath says iodized.
And you're using this for your diet, or you just dump the container in the bath when you're ready to relax?
No, I use this on my food. Yeah.
Okay. It has like a little bit dosing on the top, or just pour it in, as a...
No, so I like backfill a like salt shaker, and I just like refill it. I'm just trolling.
So Steve, you told us that you have also tried Trenbolone at 100 milligrams a day.
Oh, that was cookie cutter. I did 150 milligrams per day, 4 weeks on the guy behind the Lion Avatar's recommendation.
The Lion of Judah. So for the audience to know, that's GH50. So what happened?
So it's like, it makes sense. Sounds like a good idea. 150, 175 milligrams a test just to get my hormone replacement in, and then 150 milligrams of Tren Ace per day. Oof. And I lasted for 4 weeks, and luckily I was single at the time, so this is, but the people around me were not happy with me, that's for sure. And so after 4 weeks, that experiment discontinued, and I was wondering, why are my ankles so watery?
Oh, really? Huh?
So I'm sure I got some kidney stress from that. Yeah, for sure. Now that's all been resolved. But when I went on the GH50, like that first year where I was still pretty good, and all the knowledgeable people were still there. Yeah, I experimented with DMP and Trenbolone and this and that, and
I've tried DMP.
I wish I never registered, dude.
Yeah,
should have stayed on Intense Muscle or some of those other knowledgeable boards.
That's professional muscle. Yeah, anabolic
Intense Muscle. Intense Muscle is also good. It's Ken Skips Hills.
No, Intense is good, but it's not Dante's, right? Professional muscle.
No, Dante was also there, but he's got his whole dog pound section. But that's where
dog pound.
Dog pound. You've never been there, Derek?
Well, I thought his name was Dog Crap, not Dog Pound.
Yeah, but it's called the Dog Pound.
It's got like a little group of fanatics that follow that, and there's still some activity going on. And he had Professional Muscle, and he had the Muscle Mayhem, which I read. all solid boards with guys that actually put, their words to prank. That was Chad Nichols' page, right? Muscle Mayhem, until it got deleted. Or you
Oh, yeah,
it,
that's what that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
it was the best also.
Steve, by the way, sometime when Derek's busy, we could probably get Dante onto the show. I think it would be a good show. Dante, I'm in contact with him. Yeah, I think he would come on. Yeah, we could do that.
That's a big deal, because that guy is almost where I would say he's camera shy.
No, because he messaged me about the FWAD. Did I ever tell you about this?
Yeah, you told me. Yeah.
So I think we could. I think I could convince him to come on. That would be great.
Absolutely, would be great. Yeah, it would be great.
Okay, so the same thing happened to me basically. So for the audience to know, the younger people, there used to be a forum called. Well, there used to be a guy called GH15. If you want to learn more about him, just search on my channel GH15. I've exposed a lot of the things about this guy. But basically, when in 2007 to 2013 or so, a lot of people were influenced by him, and he popularized the high dose use of Trenbolone. The first time you know what's funny is I actually started the first ever over 10-page thread about Trenbolone online. It was in 2005 or so. I was obsessed with Trenbolone because when I was young and I hadn't used steroids, I heard Trenbolone was the one that increased strength the most. And I thought if I used Trenbolone, I could get the strongest. And, it was this mysterious compound. Not much was written about it online. Years later,
genetics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That idea. So years later, GH15 popularized the use of Trenbolone. And I eventually, in my first cycle, used Tren-Hex. I think it was Tren-Hex at something like, it's 75 something units 3 times a week, something like that.
It's moderate. Yeah, it's the old school way.
Yeah, the old school way. Exactly. We had Tren-Hex in the Middle East. I didn't notice that much from it. I don't remember the first. Actually, I think I used 100 milligrams of Tren from the Middle East in that time. And within a few days, my urine had changed colors to a frightening color. And so immediately I stopped. That was the cessation of the Tren use immediately. Right. And then years later, when I was a bit older, I went on steroids again. And this time I stayed on steroids for 3 years or so. And during that period, for 6 months, I went on Trenbolone again and stayed on Trenbolone for 6 months straight. During those, it was more than what I said during the Pete Rubish interview, actually. So I stayed on it for 6 months. And during that time, I fluctuated between 100 milligrams a day and 300 milligrams a day. But the Trenbolone I was using was not as strong as the Trenbolone in the Middle East. So I assume it was maybe half dosed or something like that.
Was that what, from one of the GH15 sources?
No. It was an underground US.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know how much I was really taking the whole time, but it was somewhere between 50 to 150 a day. And there's so many things we can discuss. The first thing is what GH15 said was, and by the way, for the audience to know, if you look at pictures on me on my Instagram with muscle, those are pictures not on Trenbolone. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures when I was at my max sizes. I was quite a bit bigger than in the pictures, but of course I wasn't weightlifting for size. But the main thing you'd notice is that within every single day, the body would change when you started at 100 milligrams. So every single day you see a little bit of a sharper definition in your body. Your muscles start to have a 3D dimension to them. They hold water in a slightly different way. Your shoulders and upper chest really become pronounced. Your beard will get thicker. My beard got thicker, much thicker, like significantly thicker over the months. My hair, for the first time ever, I noticed hair loss on a cycle. I never noticed it on any compound, including testosterone at high doses, but Trenbolone at high doses caused my hair to lose, like within a week or two, I could see hair thinning.
Weird thing with that compound is it seems like a little bit hit or miss in terms of hair loss. Like most people, they might get some, but not to the degree of where high dose testosterone is less problematic. Most people, high dose test is like the worst fucking thing for hair. So it's kind of interesting to hear that. Like I know some people who can take, I don't know, like Tren is like, for some reason they can tolerate it with no issues, but then some people just get decimated, which is kind of odd because you would think.
What happened? Oh, I'm the host now. We're still recording, but I guess Steve lost his recording.
Weird.
But anyway,
I don't know what happened.
I was actually using testosterone the whole time, so I can't be completely certain that it was the Trenbolone, honestly. I know you guys are very particular about the hair loss stuff. I'm not sure, but once I added the Trenbolone and something dramatic happened. I mean, I could see short-term shedding that was so dramatic.
The thing that's...
okay, you guys are still here. Sorry, I dropped out, so now I'm back.
Is the recording thing gonna fuck up?
No, mine is recording. Yours is recording, Derek. So
yeah.
I'm gonna...
his one, we'll have to upload it for him.
The thing that I would wonder though is the binding affinity for AR of Trenbolone versus the testosterone used. It's like, which thing is actually causing the hair loss? I would speculate that the Tren might be able to outcompete the fraction of DHT and the bolus of testosterone, perhaps. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to say for certain that it is the high test or the whatever. And obviously, you would only find out if you did like Tren solo and if the same thing happened, but no one's going to do that.
Exactly. Well, my impression was that it was the idea of Tren being androgenic and it being systemically androgenic. Maybe DHT would be worse if you're on a high dose test cycle because it's local, whereas the Tren is systemic, but it's still quite androgenic and it'll still cause that hair loss. Maybe I have less 5-alpha reductase on my scalp.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Obviously enzymatic, like density would have a role in that too. But one thing I find interesting is we often talk about how strong of an androgen Tren is, but when you actually look historically at Parabolin, it was used in women. And like, I understand that tissue selectivity of compounds, they're designed to be, the whole point of releasing it is to be more well tolerated in women and children and whatnot than the base androgen testosterone. So why is it that Trenbolone is so much more problematic in androgenic signaling to certain organ systems than testosterone, for example, when if you actually look at like Hirschberger assays and whatnot, it's technically not as androgenic milligram for milligram. Like anabolic to androgenic activity related ratio wise, it's actually more favorable than testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's
maybe
true.
through the progesterone receptor because it activates multiple receptors.
Well, first of all, I don't know the assay you're talking. I mean, are you talking about there's an androgen receptor that's the Trenbolone molecule is compared to testosterone, as opposed to all of the pharmacokinetic results of the Trenbolone molecule? Maybe one of those. Maybe testosterone is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So in like animal models, when they're trying to determine if a synthetic anabolic is more efficacious in a clinical setting than the root comparison, which would be testosterone, they look at these assays in, seminal vesicles versus, the
androgenic
elevator, that kind of stuff. And they determine, okay, this compound is more anabolic than androgenic and blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of, run with that as their kind of basis of their fundamental understanding that it's at least better than testosterone is, which is the whole idea of designing new, molecules to begin with is to be better than tests. And then they introduce it into clinical use, and Parabolin was prescribed at like, I don't remember, it was like 150 milligrams every like 3 weeks or something. And then after that, it was some sort of maintenance dose of like 1 amp every, I don't remember. I wrote about it on my site a long time ago, but
it's for osteoporosis, correct? For women.
Something, but it was definitely women, and it was regarded as better tolerated than testosterone in an androgenic context. So that's what I was just kind of wondering in terms of, we often talk about how Trenbolone is so much worse at androgenic signaling in kidneys, liver, blah, blah, blah. But it's like in practical application, milligram for milligram, is it really?
Okay, so this is such an interesting subject. So you bring up this the seminal vesicle weight of animals. So they'll also use comparisons of, like, for example, if it's a hen, they'll compare this fold on the top of the hen, which is like it's the fin on the top of the hen's head. Apparently that grows when more androgenic signaling is there. I don't know. I'm not so familiar with the studies you're referencing because I've never done an academic review of Trenbolone yet. But I am personally, having used both of them extensively, and I am a man, obviously, so maybe it's a little different. There's no question in my mind that 50 milligrams of Trenbolone is more androgenic than 50 milligrams of testosterone. Whether that be because of the way it's metabolized in the body or not, I don't know. But there's no question of that. Not only that, but that Trenbolone has not been used in women in the last 50 years at the very least.
No, it's been discontinued since for very long, 20 years.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, potentially, the fact that Trenbolone, isn't a natural molecule, maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it can't be metabolized in women the way testosterone could be metabolized naturally. I don't know. But it's certainly a more androgenic compound. And the reason why I always say it's more dangerous for the kidneys is because of that androgenic nature.
I wonder if it's more so sorry, Steve, but the tissue specific effects of certain compounds, like, for example, test. In your hair, it's more androgenic because of the 5-alpha reductase density and whatnot, as well as in the prostate and blah, blah, blah. But then when you're just looking at AR activation broad spectrum around the system, Nandrolone, which is like the most hair safe compound ever, is actually brutal for viralizing outcomes like on your voice, deepening it.
Really?
In clinical studies, it's like less well tolerated than things like Masteron. But when it comes to hair loss, Masteron will fuck you up way worse than Nandrolone. So it's not like androgenic activity equals the same side effect in every organ system from what I've seen. So I don't know if it's
there's a response to each organ has to certain compounds, right? And unfortunately, you can't block the androgen receptors in certain compounds because there's nothing like a selective. Well, they say there is, but it doesn't act like a.
There actually is. They just don't. They don't work properly.
Act like a SERM, like you would with the SERMs. At least they block the estrogen receptors in certain tissues, and they act like an estrogen in other tissues. But selective androgen receptor modulators don't do that, and it would be great if they actually do that, where they block the androgen receptors in the hair and the prostate.
That was so funny how you just, you're like, oh, wait, they do.
Casually. It would be great if they did.
Yeah, but they don't.
Yeah.
So sorry.
But Trenbolone does activate every kind of androgenic response in me. I mean, my beard got thicker. My sex drive got worsened because I happen to produce more prolactin when my progesterone receptors agonize than other people.
Yeah, I got the same.
Other people are different. Some people, they react to progesterone very well because they don't produce higher prolactin. And progesterone in itself drives sex drive. But everything else was androgenic. I gained muscle. Everything was androgenic. I mean, I don't see how it's selective whatsoever. To me, it's just it's like halotest in an injectable form. I mean, it's a really androgenic compound.
In clinical studies, it's actually referred to as a steroidal SARM instead of
incredible.
But that category is so roughly defined. You could say anything that is better than a 1-to-1 tissue selectivity is selective. And sometimes in the data you'll find like YK11, structurally, looks like a anabolic steroid essentially, but it's a SARM, even though it's steroidal backbone. Like non-steroidal non-steroidal SARMs are actually derived from anti-androgens rather than having a steroidal chemical structure. Whereas things like Trenbolone, YK11, whatever, they're more tissue selective, supposedly, than test, but they have the steroidal backbone. Therefore, they are a steroidal SARM in a lot of the clinical data you'll read. Like they actually refer to it as that word, which is interesting.
It's probably the same as pro-hormones, right? Where aromasin is classified as a pro-hormone.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, pregnenolone and DHA would also be considered pro-hormones for testosterone. So,
exactly.
Yeah, maybe it's just like semantics trying to like we all know it's a potent steroid. So
exactly. A couple of other notes I want to mention just for people who haven't done this before. One thing that I noticed, which was in contrast to what Pete Rubish was saying on my podcast, which was when I was on Trenbolone for extended periods, my sympathetic nervous drive was so high. So the effect would be that I would not sleep well. I would be tense all the time, obviously bad-tempered and so on. We can discuss personality issues later. But the result was that I was acutely stronger, as if you take Anadrol pre-workout, but all the time. So I was chronically, nervously stronger all the time. Obviously, that means when I go to the gym for the first few weeks, there were PR after PR after PR. But over time, I found I was gaining strength at a slower rate with the Trenbolone in. And I was gaining also muscle mass at a slower rate. And I should mention, I was losing body fat at a very rapid rate. So that's the most rapid I've ever lost. And whenever you eat a carbohydrate heavy meal, you guys probably know, but for the audience that doesn't know, you start sweating right after and you have a problem. You have to start thinking, should I go on a ketogenic diet or should I be eating carbohydrates because I'm going to sweat so much? So these are a couple of other considerations. And the final one I wanted to mention about Trenbolone every day is this, the personality issues. I've actually written about it in my notes as unraveling personality. So basically, first I had a horrible temper. Then you develop a combination of a temper with insecurity, which is a horrible combination where you're overconfident but totally unconfident at the same time.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly how I describe it. Yeah.
So every time someone looks at you, you at once want to be aggressive about it. Then you also, what's wrong with me? Why are they looking at me? And then the same thing will happen with
anxiety stuff. Yeah.
If you're dating someone, it'll be the worst experience of your life. You'll think she's cheating on you. If she's not, you'll think she doesn't like you when she does. You'll start to act like a woman on her period while you're dating this woman. You'll be unstable. You'll be all over the place. And that's
social media 24/7. Who's she liking?
That's why I tell my wife, whatever you go through in this pregnancy, I've been through before. I've already been through all of these things. I've been crazy. Don't worry about it.
Right. It's good. You get all that stuff out of your system, so you're a little bit more, you can understand what's going on the female side. Yeah, my wife actually asked me to stop taking it a couple of years ago.
Did she really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you turn into a huge a-hole. So
the worst combination, by the way, smoke weed chronically and take Trenbolone. You will be done. That is the worst. The level of insecurity and aggression.
Yeah. No, for sure, because even weed gives you some anxiety, you know? And people feel like, oh, he's looking at me, and then the Trenbolone on top of that turns that anxiety into 100% angry mode.
Yeah.
And people take the edge off, right? Of Trenbolone, they try to take the edge off with weed or kratom, and they just get into this prolactin anemic heaven, for themselves.
So how do you take the edge off correctly? It would be with a SSRI, because serotonin. I have a strong feeling Trenbolone in particular reduces serotonergic signaling the most because of its androgenic nature. So
you take the Trenbolone out.
Yeah, or take the Trenbolone out, or you take propranolol, so you block some of that adrenergic signaling.
Jesus.
And then you'd probably have to take something like Seroquel to sleep, because you wouldn't be able to sleep. That's a dopamine.
Yeah, you take the Ambien, and you start sleepwalking, and you clean out the fridge, and then you forget, and why is my trend not working? I'm only getting size. I'm not getting lean, like GH15 said.
Exactly.
But eating the fridge because of your Ambien.
but I want to mention, I don't take Ambien especially. So Ambien is a short-acting GABA A receptor modulator like a benzo. It won't keep you asleep if you're on Trenbolone. You'll need something like an antipsychotic, like a dopamine receptor antagonist, like Seroquel. Why I say that is because Ambien, the reason it's designed is to be short-acting. It's supposed to come, hit you, put you to sleep, and leave. For me, I used to wake up in the middle of the night on Trenbolone constantly because of the sympathetic nervous drive. It's called sleep maintenance insomnia. Your cortisol and adrenaline peak sometimes during the night. So I would wake up. The dopamine receptor antagonist blocks that. So it just turns off that nervous system. Of course, not very healthy long-term, I'm sure.
Did you pee like all night long when you were on Trenbolone too at higher doses? Like when I was running 100 to 150 milligrams of I was like 7 times a night.
Prostate enlargement. That's the prostate enlargement. That's temporary prostate enlargement due to the androgenic nature. There you go, Derek, telling me that it's so tissue selective. There you go. We were peeing too. So it hit everything. It hit the hair. It hit the beard. It hit the prostate. It hit everything.
I think it just hits everything, with a sledgehammer, even at lower dosages. And the blood work is always the worst I've seen. That's why nobody wants to do their blood work on Trenbolone.
Yeah.
But I have to shove it under their noses, when the client said, hey, can I do it after the show? No. You go now.
Yeah, and in my
HDL is 15. What do I do? Don't do the show.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the single most other than growth hormone, maybe the single most responsible anabolic or androgenic for kidney problems is Trenbolone. If I was to look at Boston's case, I imagine that if he just never used Trenbolone, it would be dramatically different. He was on Trenbolone every day for years and years and years and years.
Really?
Yeah, years. He doesn't feel Trenbolone.
I thought he swapped compounds like every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, but Trenbolone he kept often. He would switch
like
other
hormone
things.
Replacement.
Yeah. Maybe he switched.
The T and TRT.
Yeah, exactly. That's his Trenbolone replacement therapy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, honestly, I feel bad for the guy, but I think there's so many compounding factors in Boston case that it's very hard to pinpoint what did what. And I think the PTT, what was it called?
Adipotide.
Yeah, I think that just pushed him over the edge. Because if it creates apoptosis in the fat cells and it goes systemic, it creates apoptosis everywhere.
I told him that literally when he was about to use it. I told him it causes, researched it. I told him it causes cell apoptosis. If you inject it, it's going to cause all kinds of cell apoptosis. We didn't realize that he was injecting it near his kidney, obviously. And obviously he had high blood pressure all that time. But just imagine 200 milligrams of Trenbolone for years straight. That's enough on its own for most people.
It will do you in for sure. We've seen so many cases in the fitness industry, and I would only use it during a contest prep at very moderate dosages. And even 350 is too much. For most guys.
Well, let's bring up another case that we see in the fitness industry of Trenbolone's effects, which is Denis Cyplenkov. So Denis Cyplenkov is, he's the strongest arm wrestler that ever lived in history. He's unbeatable. If he was still healthy, there would be nobody that could compete with him except potentially a gentleman named Levan Saganashvili, who's from Georgia. They call him the Georgian Hulk, he's new. But most people believe nobody could compete with Denis Cyplenkov. He used to be a strong man. He can't extend his arms fully. So his arm goes like till here. He's always been like that. It's not from arm wrestling. So he used to be a strong man. He was like that. He has some kind of genetic issue. It appears to be acromegaly. I'm not entirely sure.
Looks like it, yeah.
When you look at his hands,
No, it looks like acromegaly with someone that has had estradiol peak in their adolescence. So he can't grow taller, but he continues to grow wider, and in those kind of ways.
Are there any pictures of his family? I would wonder what his genetic background is.
No, actually, not even on his Instagram.
Because I tried to look for if there's like pictures of his mom, his dad, and you can kind of make like a small assessment of what his hereditary background is, and
So interestingly, you see this often in Ukraine where the Chernobyl disaster was. There's actually another arm wrestler who had like 3 or 4 fingers, but he had double the forearm mass of any other guy. His name was Oleg something. He got in a car accident a couple of years ago. But there's a lot of these people with interesting bodies there. I don't know if it has to do to do with the Chernobyl disaster.
Could be. I mean, we were all scared to death when that happened. Well, that's what my parents told me because I was in Holland and it happened in '86, right? So. Yeah, but they all had to stay inside. But you can't stay inside from radiation.
Yeah, exactly.
His forearm is like bigger than his bicep. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's huge.
So Denis, I have some mutual friends in common with him, and what I know of him is that he uses growth hormone and insulin, which is uncommon in arm wrestling. Some of the heavyweight arm wrestlers use it, but most of the normal arm wrestlers don't. He's an unusual arm wrestler in being almost a bodybuilder in terms of his eating. Like he's very scheduled with his eating when he travels.
Very lean also.
He'll organize the day around his eating, napping. He'll force everyone else to nap and to eat at the same times as him. He uses growth hormone and insulin, which is unusual. The only other thing that I know about his use is that he was a fan of Trenbolone. I heard this from someone quite close to him after what happened to him recently, which I can tell you guys briefly about, which is that he was a big fan of Trenbolone, and apparently he was using Trenbolone for many years straight. That's and I've heard that also from a world record holder in the sport. So that's one thing. And the unfortunate outcome of this is that a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years ago, Denis got in kidney failure. So he didn't specify what the disease was, but the rumor is that it is certainly his kidneys. The rumor is that he was in kidney failure and had a kidney replacement, and he's trying to recover from that. And that's why he's still a little bit smaller.
You see that with the guys that lose a lot of muscle mass rapidly, I would always suspect that's either liver or kidney failure.
Yeah, in his case, he said kidneys, but they didn't say explicitly that they replaced it. But I think that they did, and he's going to try to.
Like to keep it private,
Yeah, exactly.
Which I can totally understand after coming out with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
It sounds so much worse than it is. I think too. Like people think they hear the NAFLD stuff and they think it's like this brutal disease. They don't really understand how many they probably have it.
Yeah.
A lot of people have it. Yeah, but because my doctors, after I went for a second opinion, they said, "Dude, it's like 50% of the people have it the same as you do."
Yeah.
But now that it's diagnosed, I need to resolve it, right? Being the hypochondriac that I am, but kidney failure is of course way more severe. But I would completely understand why people would want to keep that private because it draws so much attention, and everybody wants to keep this fitness industry like, oh, where are the bodies, right? From the famous quote from, well, they're all around us, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, in the sport of arm wrestling,
it's all self-induced.
That's true. In the sport of arm wrestling, there are actually a couple of other interesting, freaky people. There's one called Dmitry Trubin. Dmitry Trubin was, Denis was always huge. He was a super heavyweight. Dmitry Trubin was in the 180s or 190s originally. And a few years ago, there's a video on YouTube. You can search The Rise of Dmitry Trubin. It's by, a compilation of clips. You can see this guy gain about 80 pounds of muscle in the course of 3 years or so. He goes from being 180 to 240 and beating monster Michael Todd, who was recently with Larry Wheels in Dubai. You guys have seen him, the guy with the big beard. He's the first guy to ever beat Michael Todd with this weird. Michael Todd has this weird technique where it's called the King's move, where he hangs his arm and you can't really press it. And Dmitry Trubin, they call him the Optimus Prime. He gained like 80 pounds of muscle, went and figured out how to defeat him. It was a crazy match. There's another guy called, as I mentioned, Levan Saganashvili. They call him the Georgian Hulk. He was totally normal sized. He was like 190, 200 pounds. Search The Rise of Levan Saganashvili, viewers online on YouTube. Search The Rise of Levan Saganashvili. You see this guy go from 190 to 350 in the course of 3 years. It's unbelievable. He ate himself. It's just crazy. It's not even all muscle. Half of it's his head growing. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that's what I'm surprised about with some of these arm wrestlers is that the acromegaly is very pronounced.
Severe.
Yeah. I wonder if they take all the TB500 and the BPC 157 stock,
I was thinking
the inflammation they have in their joints must be tremendous, probably more than powerlifters.
Yeah, Scott Mendelson and I were speculating on Levon when he first gained weight. I went to Scott and I was like, Scott, what's going on? How did this guy get so big? And Scott was like, I think they figured out some myostatin thing in the USSR. He's like, there's something in Eastern Europe. They figured it out. That's not G. He said he calls growth hormone G. So that's not G. That's something else.
You say a G in New York, that means something else also.
GHB?
That's a GHB.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he calls.
You have to be careful.
Exactly.
So this is him. This thread is called Levon Saganashvili as an 80-kilogram mortal before he left humanity behind. And I don't know if you guys can see this in the chat.
Yeah,
I see it.
Yeah, I see it.
So like presumably he hadn't touched really anything though before this transformation, or was it like he kind of peaked and then he like blew up again?
We would think that so the normal way you do it so he used to compete in the world's competitions, which are amateur, and they test randomly the winners. Usually what happens there is everyone cheats. And
Me and Steve are just like, okay.
So everyone cheats and then they hope they don't get selected for the testing. And if they do, they hope they pass. Usually they fail. So it's assumed that one would assume that Levon and his partner, Vikvinia, his name is Gennady Vikvinia from Georgia. One would assume those two were already cycling, and then Levon decided to become a superhuman.
I think Steve's frozen. I can look at the face that he's stuck on. It's been like that for like 20 seconds now.
I thought he was very pleased with my discussion.
Hopefully it doesn't screw up like the last one, but
it will. But we'll have the full recording, so it'll be fine. But anyway,
okay.
Yeah, the point is we would have thought that they would have been cycling and that suddenly Levon decided to just, like you said, surpass humanity.
Yeah.
And I really, between you and I really don't know what he did also. I really don't know. I mean, if it's GH and insulin, it's something on a whole different level.
Yeah, he like looks insane, dude, from what I'm seeing in these Google images right now.
Watch that video, Derek, when we go off. I'll send you a link. The Rise of Levon Saganashvili. It has music in the background and stuff. You can see his clips of his arm wrestling meets. But look, you see this guy go and just like normal guy, and then suddenly he just starts growing and growing and growing, and then suddenly no one can beat him. And at the moment, no arm wrestler in the world can beat Levon except Denis.
32 years old. How old is Denis? He's got to be in his 30s still, right?
40s.
I'm back, right?
He's 38 apparently.
You froze in an interesting posture.
You were like mid laughing and it just froze there for 30 seconds.
We'll fix that in post-production. I'm sorry guys, this is a third world country internet, so it's not 100% reliable, unfortunately.
Well, there's no second world anymore. So I think that there's no USSR. So everything's just first and second, I think.
Yeah, I should be second. I got tremendous upload, but it's it's probably only internet in Thailand that is good, but to the outside world, it's still a bit of a slow connection. Sorry, guys.
Can we briefly talk about this Gonadorelin and HCG?
Oh yeah.
Before Steve tells us about this really interesting GLP thing, but briefly about this. So you noticed. Where did this come about? I think that Pete Rubish mentioned it. His HRT clinic. Can you tell us the background, Derek?
Yeah. So the HCG has like been reclassified as I think it's like a biologic or something now. I forget the exact thing that's happening. And frankly, I stay more out of the back end stuff. I'm more marketing front end stuff. But as far as I know, it's a lot of these clinics. It's harder to get access to it. Harder to get access now, or it's more expensive. I don't really remember the exact reason, but I know that margins wise, they're getting more money now to sell this Gonadorelin stuff, which is a GnRH agonist, which if you're, viewers are probably more familiar with things like Triptorelin, things of that nature that operate in a similar way. And basically the idea would be I guess the marketing angle that a lot of them are taking are, you don't want to take HCG because that's, it's not natural. Whereas GnRH agonists, you're basically getting your whole HPTA involved and you're, mimicking what you would naturally do if you weren't shut down on TRT. So with this, we can mimic the entire cycle of your HPTA and avoid, we're not skipping the part with the gonadotropin releasing hormone at the top. We're actually getting the full spectrum of effects going, and you're regulating how much LH and FSH output you get, and it's endogenously produced LH and FSH rather than a synthetic analog without any FSH whatsoever. So it's like, logically, it actually sort of sounds good. You know, you're getting actual real LH and FSH, not an analog of LH, which may have some strange interactions with epigenetics that I don't know about. That might, who knows, you know, during fertility, I would prefer having real LH probably than some analog thing personally. And then
or some recombinant stuff, you know.
Yeah. And then you get the actual FSH too on top of that. So why would this be suboptimal?
And you keep your pituitary active, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when you have a organ system that's like inactive for years on end, what happens to it is just, you know, atrophy and like stop functioning entirely to the point that you lose it or or whatever the saying is, use it or lose
luckily the pituitary is, you know, involved in so many endocrine systems, like the growth hormone, the prolactin, and you know, a couple other hormones. So at least it stay active. I think it's mostly the hypothalamus that really downregulates, which is of course the main source of gonadotropin hormone releasing hormones. So even if you take gonadorelin or Kespiptin 10 or block the estrogen receptors with Clomid, I don't think that the HTPA even then stays intact.
No, but there's more concerns than just that. So first of all, you're right, absolutely, Derek. There's apparently some research showing that natural LH and FSH synthesis may be somehow superior. Number one, it may induce conception a little bit quicker in some studies than using HCG, using a gonadotropin releasing hormone receptor agonist. That's one thing. And, you know, obviously having it natural may be better. But the issue is this. So just for the audience to remember, we always talk about this, but there's in the brain two parts, the hypothalamus and pituitary, and the third part in your body is the gonads. The gonads produce the testosterone and the sperm. The hypothalamus releases something called gonadotropin releasing hormone, which tells the pituitary to release LH and FSH. When you take HCG, you replace LH. You don't replace FSH. The problem is gonadotropin releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus in a pulsatile fashion. It's not released continuously. And it's released every 2 hours or so. And what happens is if you release the gonadotropin releasing hormone continuously, it actually causes a downregulation in the gonadotropin releasing hormone receptor in the pituitary, causing a total halt in the synthesis of LH and FSH, which is why pedophiles are treated with gonadotropin releasing hormone agonists. However,
Triptorelin,
yeah, exactly, or Lurolelin. There's a few of them, but the thing about it is, so when they use it for fertility, what they do is there's an actual implant pump that releases the gonadotropin releasing hormone every 2 hours in you, which is extremely inconvenient. And extremely, I mean, even the academic papers will mention this is very inconvenient for people to do. Otherwise, you're going to take something that makes you a eunuch if it gives you it consistently. Now, the pulsatile one, is it really useful? Well, it's useful in one sense. The results of the pulsatile gonadotropin releasing hormone studies show that people have lower testosterone on that than HCG. And it's hypothesized to be because they're not maxing out their luteinizing hormone response. But you could easily figure that out for yourself before you go on steroids. You could just take HCG, you know, assuming you're crashed, or even if you're not crashed, you take HCG, see what your testosterone level is at, get a testosterone level that you're okay with, you don't feel is too much, and then just stay at that dose. So you know you're not overdoing it. And it may be a consistent. The other thing is that now it's not circadian, but that's also somewhat fine because after our 30s, our steroidogenesis is not very circadian anyway. It's somewhat flattened. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. How's my video and audio quality in your guys' end? Because you guys,
very good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. On my side, it's I can't barely see you, but I can hear you. So
you can't see us?
It's like very blurry, so that the connection is not too great on my end.
Oh, really? Well, it's good that we've both saved it in our computers.
Yeah. Imagine if you were recording right now only. Fuck.
That'd be messed up. Yeah. So I need both of your recordings so I can splice it all together.
Yeah.
So, you know, going by the blood work that I've seen on gonadorelin and Kespiptin, you know, both of these compounds, like at the recommended dosage of the hormone replacement clinic as a replacement of the ACG protocols that we were doing before when it was still pharmaceutical or medically approved, you see that the LH and FSH is like
lower
in range, but at the bottom. And I think that if you block the estrogen receptor with Clomid on cycle, which is obviously the side effects are pretty much intolerable after a prolonged period of time, you see that the LH and FSH is actually higher.
Higher than on gonadotropin.
Gonadotropin, on gonadorelin and kisspeptin 10.
Really? Yeah.
And of course, and with triptorelin, that's not sustainable because the lowest dose is like 100 milligrams, single administration. But if you do that multiple times, and especially if you go pharmaceutical grade, that's like 3.75 milligrams. Or what was the dose? 100 micrograms, and then the sterilizing dose is like in the milligrams range.
With triptorelin, it's sketchy too, because a lot of these people are getting it from research chemical sites where it comes in 1 to 2 milligrams per vial, which is like a castration dose if you fuck up your measurement.
Right. I mentioned it in the mentioned it in the post-cycle therapy ebooks. Even if you go with 3.75 or 4 or 11.25 milligram triptorelin dose, don't use that because you're so far off of the useful dose. You're just overstimulating, and unless you're sexual deviant or you have prostate enlargement, it's not something you want to use.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the castration dose again? I don't even remember. I knew it was in the milligrams, but I don't know what it is.
There's 2 doses. So it's 3.75 milligrams per vial for a single administration and 11.25 milligrams.
So how come?
That's multiple days, by the way, for complete castration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not a single dose, but why risk it, right?
Those individuals would eventually recover down the line, would they not?
I think it's permanent.
Really?
I think that's permanent, yeah. So
what happens to the rest of their pituitary then that does all the other stuff?
It's only the process of the luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. I don't think it affects prolactin and growth hormone secretion, etc. I don't think it affects that.
It could only be permanent if it was if the receptor on the pituitary for gonadotropin releasing hormone, or if gonadotropin releasing hormone was excitatory and that receptor died. That's the only way it would happen. If you maxed out and the receptor died. But like you said, Steve, if you just keep a sustained dose, it'll cause that in the short term. I don't know if it's. I think if you do the sustained dose for a period of time, then like we said with the body, if you don't use it, you lose it. You'll eventually have issues.
Doesn't that seem weird? How it so sensitive to overdosing that you could castrate yourself, but then you can just blast your balls with HCG and somehow be fine for however long.
I'm not sure if you can castrate yourself with a single time. I'm not sure, and the only, as we said, so look at it in the brain. So because I know the nervous system better than other things. So in the brain, if you have too much dopamine, the dopamine receptors would downregulate, and if that doesn't work, the cells will die. That'll happen for dopamine. That won't happen for GABA. If you have too much GABA, like if you go overdose on a benzo, you're not going to have GABAergic cells die because GABA isn't excitatory as a hormone. So I guess it depends how it affects the cell and whether it causes damage in too much quantities. We should look into this. I think we're speculating a lot. There's probably
I'm doing some hard reaching here.
I was wondering if because Clomid is on cycle has been shown to keep LH and FSH production a little bit more favorable than gonadorelin or kisspeptin 10, at least from the blood work that I've seen. But I wonder if enclomiphene is a more suitable replacement because it appears that most people don't have, so much side effects.
No, enclomiphene is superior in all trials that compared the two. And Derek's the only HRT clinic that I've ever heard of that carries enclomiphene citrate, which I'm just very impressed by.
I don't know why more people don't look at that, to be honest. It's not like it's that new. It's been talked about for at least a few years at this point, I think.
But not in the PED. I mean, people haven't talked about it in bodybuilding, at least. I don't think so.
Not much. No, not much.
They're still putting people on Clomid monotherapy at clinics and shit. I did a video the other day about, there was this 20-year-old kid. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was the name Alex Eubank got prescribed Clomid for his test levels. He went in with he was just going in because he's an influencer guy. He's getting some vitamin B12 injections for free because he's an influencer dude. He might want to promote them or whatever, get some free blood work. They check his test levels and try and give him an interpretation of how healthy he is and what he can do to optimize. He has an LH level at the top of the reference range and a total T in the mid 600s. And then they tell him obviously you're not a candidate for TRT, obviously, but we can prescribe you Clomid to put your testosterone levels up to the top of the reference range. And then this 20-year-old kid is literally considering going on Clomid monotherapy at 20 years old to bump his test from 650 up to like 900.
Do you think that can happen?
Out there.
Can the LH, if the LH is at the top of the range, I'm not sure that can happen. It usually Clomid or an AI will work if the LH is low.
I've seen it with guys that ran HMG instead of the ACG protocol before their first cycle. And then, the LH and FSH is obviously at the top of the reference range or over it. And then their testosterone goes up pretty high as well.
Well, that's why I thought it was even more ridiculous, because they were trying to give it to him when he had an LH that was literally like peaked. It's like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. So he had he had peaked gonadotropins. They were like, take this Clomid.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Dude. But there's a couple of
something.
There's a couple of side notes we can mention on the topic. One other reason that it's really reckless, other than him having a high LH, is the fact that it's associated with ocular damage.
That's what I said in my video too. I was like, you're gonna damage your fucking eyeballs in order to marginally increase your testosterone, and probably what are you going to get out of it? You're going to feel moody as fuck all the time. Is your free T going to go up significantly, or is it just going to be your total? You're occupying estrogen receptors everywhere,
and it does lower the IGF-1 levels also. So I felt incredibly weak the last time I was running Clomid for my post-cycle therapy, to the point your exercise performance goes down. So maybe your testosterone goes up, but I think overall the workout capacity goes down. So in the end, if you're an influencer, what's the point?
Yeah.
Now, if you're an obese person, though, you may want to take an aromatase inhibitor to improve your testosterone.
Yeah.
Because just being fat will make you aromatize more, and your LH will probably be a bit low. So that might work for you.
Or ideally, you would take a GLP-1 and then just lose weight and then increase your test naturally.
Yeah, tell us, what is this? So what is the GLP-1, Steve? And what's the experiment?
First, we should preface it. There was this article on BBC that went, I guess, viral for a written article, and everyone was sending it to me being like, look at this new weight loss thing. Oh, it's the next big thing in obesity treatment. People were losing. The average was 33 pounds of weight loss in the trial. Granted, it was over a 15-month span of time, I think, but compared to placebo with the same diet and lifestyle advice, it was 2 to 4 pounds lost in placebo with diet and lifestyle advice versus 30 plus pounds in the same diet and lifestyle advice of the semaglutide, which the only thing it did different was allow these people to stick to a diet model that was lower calorie and actually, be able to adhere to that deficit without having their willpower, fall apart and them just binge eat or something. So you could tell it was blatantly, there's no fat loss properties or anything really. It's not increasing your metabolism significantly or anything crazy. It's literally just making you satiated and allowing you to diet properly.
It's just purely an appetite suppressant that follows the natural pathway. So these glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists, they mimic satiation in response to eating. So normally when you eat, you would release glucagon-like peptide 1 and gastric inhibitory polypeptide, which will then slow gastric emptying, modulate your stomach acidity levels, and promote a little bit of insulin secretion downstream. And amylin secretion, which then further blunts appetite. So that's the normal response to eating. So a lot of people that are obese or overeating, they probably don't get a similar response as people who are chronically undereating. Some people are chronically full, right? I don't have so much appetite. Maybe they have a different hormone balance compared to the people that are obese and they never feel satiated. So by stimulating this natural pathway with semaglutide, liraglutide, dulaglutide, and a couple other medications, they just feel more satiated, and now they don't overeat anymore. So they feel more satiated with a smaller meal. And that's why I started taking it a couple months ago when I diet or do my fasts, because it's quite popular in Thailand amongst the models and the people who don't understand so much about exercise and cardio and other fat loss pharmacology. So they just kill their appetite and they eat 2 meals per day, intermittent fasting, and they lose a lot of weight.
The reason I had such interest in it was more so too because it's one of the few things that actually promotes potent appetite suppression without having to abuse your brain with heavy duty stimulants. So you don't have to take amphetamine to crush your appetite. Not that amphetamine can't be used intermittently at reasonable dosages, but I'm just saying a lot of these guys, when they're trying to lose a lot of weight, they're using high dose Adderall every fucking day, high dose clenbuterol every fucking day, plus this, plus this, plus this.
Your beta-2 adrenergic receptors completely downregulate after a while, and then it doesn't work anymore.
Well, not just that, but just a brief note for everyone to know. All of those things are associated with worse mortality. All of the appetite suppressants so far discovered are associated with worse health.
Yeah, and some of them even show up as an amphetamine on a 5-panel drug test. So that makes it even more unfavorable to use. So these glutides, by mimicking the natural pathway, you just simply feel more satiated with food, and you definitely don't overeat. And when you do eat a little bit too much, because it slows gastric emptying, you just feel nauseous. So you do that once or twice, and then you're over it. So I do this fasting mimicking diet right now, right? I eat 3 salads per day to resolve this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as fast as possible. I'm not hungry. I'm not thinking about food at all, but I don't feel this wired, jittery, heightened state, increased heart rate. I'm not sweating. My metabolism goes down, obviously, by not eating so many calories. So I feel a little bit cold. That's why I'm in sweaters, even though I'm in Thailand. Okay. But it just takes your mind off food, which is absolutely great.
Isn't it
really? Sounds like I'm promoting it, but it is really. It's one of the best appetite suppressants I've ever used.
Is it injectable?
Injectable, yeah. But
it's injectable, yeah.
Interesting thing that we should talk about that ties back to what we were talking about in the beginning is that in rodent models, it causes thyroid tumors, a very rare type of thyroid cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma. And it's unknown if it causes this in humans, but it's like what is it called? The black box warning or whatever. That is the worst case scenario. Like it may cause this. So I just thought it was interesting how this thing is promoting something similar to what we were talking about at the beginning. But as far as the preparation, yeah, they're all injectable except for semaglutide, which seems to be the most efficacious, at least when you compare reductions in hemoglobin A1C and weight reduction. It's the most potent. And, we can talk about why or why not that is next, but they altered I don't remember what they bound to it or something to make it survive its transit through the GI, but they did something that significantly alters stomach pH to the point where you can't, there's only one that's orally bioavailable that you can actually use. And it's the semaglutide one. You can either inject it once a week and it has a really long half-life, or you can take it once daily orally, and a little bit of it survives to the point where you need to take it daily to have enough, serum concentrations to actually exert the, pharmacologic effect. But it seems like it's way more side effect ridden. The oral one, it's like prevalence of vomiting is like 10% of patients or something. Yeah, it's insane. So it's quite a potent drug, but it also seems to be pretty side effect ridden from GI side effects and whatnot. So people having brutal nausea, some people are just randomly vomiting like violently. But I think it depends on how you use it, though, obviously, too, and which drug
and lifestyle. I mean, most of these medications are examined on people with type 2 diabetes who had a tendency to overeat and could not get their type 2 diabetes under control, with a better diet model. So they need to use pharmacology to reduce their appetite. So I'm sure their eating habits were not as good as people generally in the fitness industry, where we're measuring our food and focusing on the micronutrients and make better food choices altogether. Just when you're on a diet, your caloric intake is so low that you just get this lingering hunger feeling that you can't even suppress with, traditional appetite suppressants that are stimulatory. So I feel in our cases, when we're a little bit more health conscious and focus on our diet, it's highly beneficial at the lowest effective dose. Like increasing the dose will just make you nauseous and maybe result in hypoglycemia, because it does promote a little bit of insulin secretion. And now you're combining, let's say, a liraglutide or a dulaglutide with Trenbolone or other compounds which are known to reduce your blood sugar levels. Now you get this overlapping effect, and that's something you definitely don't want.
My concern was only that it may, I assume in a fast, it would really not be helpful, because it would cause insulin secretion and sort of signal to the body sort of that you're eating when you're not eating. You know what I mean? So it would go against the nutrient sensing pathways. But listen, say I wanted to lose these cheeks. What would you recommend that I do? No, I'm not joking. Like, what if I wanted to do a trial with these? Which chemical would you recommend I try first? And how do people source these things? And so in a vague sense.
So here it's available in the pharmacies because liraglutide, semaglutide, and dulaglutide are FDA approved, so it's locally available. The injectable versions, we don't have exenatide or the oral semaglutide. Those are not available here, but I can get the 3 main injectable versions. I can still recommend it while fasting because it enhances insulin secretion in response to food. So if you're not eating any carbohydrates and you get a little bit of gluconeogenesis from the glycerol backbone and the amino acids and whatever you get through apoptosis, autophagy, I didn't notice a reduction in blood sugar levels while running this while I was fasting.
Okay.
So that makes it ideal. Now, when you're in a caloric deficit while cutting and you're combining it with other compounds like Trenbolone or IGF-1 or whatever lowers blood sugar levels, then that effect is enhanced. So some of my clients did notice a hypoglycemia in those cases, when you're doing a little bit more cardio. So you're eating more, but you notice more hypoglycemia. So in your case, a low dose of, I would prefer a short-acting one, the liraglutide, over semaglutide or dulaglutide because they have a 1-week half-life. I have a video about this. You can.
You have a video on it?
You don't need to take notes.
Check it out.
Give me those views.
No, I want to experiment with it because I've never tried these. This is very interesting.
So from what I've seen, as far as choosing, and this is like what I've been looking at pretty extensively recently, or at least trying to research as much as I can since I saw that first article come out. So it seems like liraglutide is one of the original ones, and it's still probably one of the best options. And its pharmacokinetic profile is such that you can see if you tolerate it well, and if you don't, you get it out of your system very quickly. So it seems like the most optimal thing for somebody who is, obviously conscious of side effects, especially when it comes to things that can cause you to violently vomit potentially. You don't want to be using a 1-week half-life drug like semaglutide off the bat. Yeah. So for me, what I saw though is Novo Nordisk, they were comparing their own Victoza against Ozempic is the actual like brand name or whatever of the liraglutide versus semaglutide. And in the trials, semaglutide again outperforms the liraglutide in hemoglobin A1C metrics, weight loss metrics, appetite suppression metrics. Everything looks better. However, it has a 1-week half-life. And, so ultimately I think it comes down to your risk, I guess, in terms of side effect profile. So like for me, what I would want to do, and what I'm highly considering when it's time to lose a bunch of weight, is potentially liraglutide off the bat, because I don't want to have a 1-week half-life thing in my system that I have no idea how I'd respond to. If I respond well enough to the Victoza stuff, pending I can get like a prescription and whatnot, blah, 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 then I would switch from that to the Ozempic one potentially, because it seems to be the most efficacious. And I don't know if I'd want to, like, I don't mind pinning stuff daily, but it's like another thing I have to worry about too. So I don't know. But then
the insulin syringe. So for me, it's really not a big deal.
But then that calls into question, do you want something active for a week in your system that is basically working by causing insulin to spike too, which is like obviously a not good thing for anti-aging properties and whatnot, and having a bolus amount at once that lasts for a week? Like, I don't know. It seems like even though Victoza is like a more primitive version, just the half-life in itself makes it a more favorable choice for the majority of individuals. And I think that's what Steve's preferences as well. So that's probably what I would start with personally, and just like assess my tolerance and whatnot.
Is it like a daily injection?
Yeah.
Yeah, the liraglutide is daily, and then dulaglutide and semaglutide, those have a longer active or half-life of 4.5 days to a week. So that's 1 injection per week. The problem is I experimented with dulaglutide first because it's a lot cheaper method to go with, when you calculate it on a week-to-week basis. And then at the lowest effective dose or an increment higher, you get nauseous the first 2 days, so you really don't feel like eating. And then the last 2 days, 3 days, until you're ready for another injection, this appetite just increases. So for us, we need to eat 5-6 meals per day, right? Assuming we're trying to stay on top of our protein and nutrient intake. We need to eat, otherwise we go catabolic after a certain point. So if you're not able to eat and you get nauseous and you don't feel like eating, you're missing meals. Now you're slowly impairing your metabolic rate. You don't get the nutrients to recover from the workout. So I noticed that with the dulaglutide, I felt nauseous for 2 or 3 days, and then I felt increasingly hungry, and then I would overeat in the weekend. Whereas so I didn't feel like trying the semaglutide because it's considerably more expensive.
On the day, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Leo, on the days you use it's dextroamphetamine, correct?
Yes.
Do you have a potent appetite suppression effect that allows you to like extend your intermittent fasting longer the days you use it, or not really?
It depends on a lot of factors, like how much I'm eating during the time, my eating window. Normally, like before, a few months ago, I would get a bit of appetite suppression for a few hours. Not much. 5 milligrams of dextroamphetamine. And by the way, dextroamphetamine does less appetite suppression than levoamphetamine.
Because I was going to say, hypothetically, you could, the liraglutide, which has the 13-hour half-life or whatever, you could hypothetically, on the days you were using the dextroamphetamine, not have to use a GLP-1 agonist because you'd already get the appetite suppression from your stimulatory stuff. And then on the days you don't use the stims, you would have that window where you could use the GLP-1s like 3 days a week, have it in and out of your system so you're not chronically pushing insulin up, which, obviously you wouldn't want, and I wouldn't want either. So you almost get like broad spectrum, full week-long appetite suppression, but you're only using the drugs for little pieces here and there.
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
The insulin release is not that dramatic because I checked my blood sugar readings the first couple of times when I was fasting and using the liraglutide or the dulaglutide, and they barely change.
But that's your blood sugar. That could, that's downstream.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but if your insulin secretion would be elevated during the time you would be fasting, your blood sugar levels would be down.
Sometimes people have normal blood sugar levels, but they go do their OGTT test, their oral glucose tolerance test, and they have higher insulin. Who knows?
Yeah,
but potentially, I think we should experiment. Definitely, this sounds like really promising.
Yeah, isn't that like the first step that you see though? Is where you have your blood glucose is in check, but you're over secreting insulin in order to get it there. That's like the first step in diabetes progression, anyway. So if I have you would assume
insulin
that
sensitivity.
Yeah, you would assume that you'd have to be so hyperinsulinemic to get the hypoglycemia for that to happen.
Yeah.
This is very promising.
All the research that I've done and the people that I've talked to that use these compounds are physically active. So I'm not assuming that there's any insulin resistance present.
And there's a lot of people that are like Gen Pop people who have who would never be fit otherwise, that are just actually obese people that are losing 50 pounds on this stuff. Like people who, if they weren't using this drug, they would be obese still. And people who, if they stop it because of they don't tolerate the side effects well, they start gaining the weight back. Like that's very common to see.
Yeah, because their diet model is terrible and they don't perform any exercise. So for the guys that do perform exercise and their diet model is correct and they pay attention to everything else, a very low effective dose of the liraglutide 0.6 to 1.2 milligrams, which is way below what they recommend for people with type 2 diabetes, in combination with a small amphetamine to keep you focused and, or some sort of nootropic or whatever to keep you going, that would probably be ideal. And I would not even take amphetamines. Like, modafinil is a wakefulness drug.
Yeah.
Right. It's not really classified as a amphetamine, but you have the phentermine and sibutramine and all these ephedrine. Basically, is an amphetamine.
I've noticed recently, I've been experimenting a little bit with the combination of modafinil with a dopaminergic drug like amphetamine. And I've noticed actually the problem with raising an amphetamine dose is that the higher you raise the amphetamine dose, the more adrenaline you get and less dopamine sort of effects. So a lower dose of like 5 milligrams of dextroamphetamine is probably ideal to get the most dopaminergic effect. But sometimes you get the dopaminergic effect, but you actually want to be stimulated also. But you don't want to abuse the amphetamine and you don't want to abuse your dopamine receptors. You don't want them to downregulate. So you got your dopamine, but you want to be awake. Sometimes it's really useful to add modafinil on top of that. I've noticed recently, very useful together because you're not abusing that dopamine receptor. Modafinil tends to work, it's thought, it's still a little bit of a mystery, but mainly like far off through norepinephrine. It has some dopaminergic effect, but it's not so direct.
No,
what are you using, like 50 milligrams or something?
Yeah, I'm actually using adrafinil.
Oh, you're using the isn't that liver toxic?
I don't know if it is or not, but I've just been experimenting very short term, like 3 or 4 times. But I've been using adrafinil, which is shorter acting. I don't know why would it be. More liver toxic than modafinil.
It's a prodrug that is broken down in the liver, and I thought it had some inherent hepatotoxicity, if I remember correctly.
It may. I just don't have modafinil on hand, and it's longer acting. I would like to get prescription adrafinil.
Oh, prescription adrafinil.
Because I want a shorter, I don't want a longer acting.
Oh, the elimination half-life is only 1 hour.
Yes, it's not really 1 hour. It feels like it's 5 hours.
But if its metabolite is modafinil, then how would that make a difference?
It's still
Wouldn't that just be the equivalent of just taking a much lower dose of modafinil?
I guess so. That's true. That may be true. That may be true. I didn't know its metabolite was modafinil. Actually, I wasn't very.
No, yeah, it's a prodrug to modafinil. That's how it works, and that's how it's the loophole to sell it legally online, which really isn't.
I never liked that
so I guess that's why it's okay. That makes sense. The half-life isn't as short as an hour. It feels like 6 hours. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, definitely not.
Right.
But either way, it is really useful. In addition to the amphetamine, it's quite great. It's much smoother, less stimulatory, and you can still get that dopamine effect.
I know several people who combined low dose of modafinil with Adderall, also at a low dose, or a low dose of Ritalin, and then get an overlapping effect, and apparently it enhances.
Yes.
So what I did is I combined 50 milligrams of modafinil, now that I want appetite suppression, with a low dose of ribulsine, which also has some serotonergic effects.
What is that?
Alpha yohimbine.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That does. Yeah, and it has the adrenergic effect.
So you have a little bit of an overlap. So now you're in a good mood, you get appetite suppression, but you also stay productive. So now on my 8th day of fasting mimicking, I'm still going, well, without thinking about food.
Yeah, it's an incredible accomplishment. This is very exciting.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to watch a video right now.
I had a cheat meal yesterday, I'll be honest,
What did you have?
Just the one sandwich, because that's all I could eat.
The weekly sandwich that you get at that place?
But normally I would have like 3 or 2, and now it was like halfway done. I was like, okay, babe, you take the rest. I gave it to my wife. And then a couple hours later, my wife served me a bowl of fruit and yogurt, which I also finished. But that was my cheat meal yesterday.
Part of the reason I'm so excited about this thing too is because I don't know about you guys, like I'm sure you probably experience the same thing as me, but for me, right when I eat anything with carbohydrates in it, my mental clarity and ability to lock in on what I'm doing is like 50% of what it is prior to that. So my intermittent fasting window is critical for my productivity. So if I can drag that out longer with less hunger pangs during that time, that's a huge thing for not only just being able to get leaner with greater ease, but in addition to that, side effect, make way more fucking money and get way more done, because for me, like I when I even think about my brain when I'm working after I've ate, I'm like, this is a fraction of what I should be working at right now. And it like actually annoys me when I have to eat my first meal, because I'm like, I'm about to drop my IQ by like however many points. Like right when I eat my first meal.
I've actually never eaten a meal on a day that I was intending to be productive since I was 19 until after I finished my day. I've never done it.
Okay.
Because by the age of 19, I realized that if I ate in the morning, once I started to basically really try to use my brain, I realized that if I ate in the daytime, that's it. Something happened to my brain where it didn't work afterwards. And my brain was like sort of like lazy and slow and not rigorous. And
you're just in a fog for the rest of the day, it feels like. And that's why I've highly considered, part of me doing this bulk was partially to acclimate myself to higher calories so I could switch to a keto diet and tolerate it without feeling like I am not satiated. Because I tried the keto diet at like 2,600, 2,700 calories and trying to keto adapt when I was in a deficit. Impossible. I was like, this diet is it's trying to be satisfied off this diet when I'm eating avocados and shit that is super calorie dense. Impossible, dude. So for me, I've been trying to like slowly titrate my calories up, so now I can hopefully switch from a carb dense diet to a keto one, go full productivity mode, probably increase my intermittent fasting window to something like 18-6 or no 16-8 ideally, and then actually get like a ton of work done, eat for like the last 4 hours of the day maybe or something, and not be hungry for that full window with the GLP maybe, and not have to abuse stims in order to stay, appetite free during that time frame. It could be like a very potent combination of a bunch of things that compounds for just maximum mental sharpness.
Speaking of which,
well, I can vouch for that, because that's basically what I've been doing for last couple of months. Not every day, but I don't get the brain fog after a ketogenic meal, so I've been doing keto diet for the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
I would just get the brain fog after training. That's why I stopped training right now, because it kills my productivity for 4 to 5 hours.
Which we should discuss. So let's discuss how the ketogenic diet reduces brain fog. So
do you get the brain fog, by the way, like with your perfect diet model, with like you eat, as far as I know, a pretty dialed in diet, but it still has things like blueberries and other things that have,
that's before bed.
Blueberries will give me brain fog the next day if I
if I have fruit. Yeah, if I have fruit, it's only before bed, when I need to turn off my brain. Otherwise, I can't sleep.
So I've noticed, like, for me, the more carbohydrate rich my diet is, which means the more hummus, baba ghanoush, which are 2 sauces that I add to my salads, eggplant based and chickpea based. Okay. The more of those that I add to my salads, and the more fruits I eat at night, which means berries or cranberries or raspberries or blueberries exclusively, the more of those I eat, the less obviously clear my thinking is. In my case, I have to make I always try to make a choice then between my health and my actual clarity of thinking the next day. But I wanted to discuss briefly how the ketogenic diet may make your thinking clearer. So oxidative stress in the brain and neuroinflammation actually causes that fog, that brain fog. So the ketogenic diet, number 1, improves the efficiency of the mitochondrial respiratory chain, thereby reducing free radicals in the brain. So it actually reduces oxidative stress in the brain. Also, ketogenic diets are consistently shown to increase glutathione synthesis and glutathione peroxidase synthesis. So overall, I think the main impact on the brain fog is the reduction of oxidative stress, which is why in my mornings, by the way, before I work, I not only take cholinergic things, but I take free radical scavengers every morning. And I notice it has an impact on the clarity of my thinking. The second thing I wanted to mention about the clarity of thinking. So the other thing it does is improve the metabolism of the brain. So ketones are more efficient at providing the brain with energy. That's one thing. And also they also improve the mitochondrial respiration by increasing ATP synthesis. So basically, and that's why ketogenic diets are so much associated with preservation of function in neurodegenerative disease, because a lot of that has to do with metabolic function and oxidative stress, both causing damage in the brain in the long term. So ketogenic diets, for most of my programs for clients, when they have anxiety issues, my diet program will always have I actually have a section like I write out about, depending on the person, it's a little bit different, but about how ketogenic diets may help them. And that they have to make a choice between getting the phytochemicals that they want all the time and having that clarity of thinking and preservation of nervous system.
Doesn't it seem weird, though, that even the healthy foods still produce the brain fog if it's inflammation related? Like if I'm having a giant thing of blueberries in a healthy yogurt and then I feel brain dead after.
I think it's also the switch from, when you get a high glucose concentrations in the brain, and then it especially when you do this during a ketogenic diet, where first you're working on ketones and then you're switching to glucose, which is in most cases preferred. You're sending a little bit of a weird signal to your brain. So that's why I would always avoid any kind of carbohydrate until in the evening. And then I would use carbohydrates to turn the brain off and get a little bit of a serotonin and melatonin response.
It's like, how do you know which it is, though? You know what I mean? Like if you have a big carbohydrate dense meal, is it the what'd you say, the serotonergic effects of it or whatever, like that you would get from a carbohydrate dense meal versus the inflammation? Like, how do you know what the brain fog is? Because like for me, I get super tired when I have fruit plus yogurt or just fruit on its own, to be honest.
So well, there's a couple of things. First of all, insulin causes that major effect. That insulin moves things out of your bloodstream that are being used for your brain.
Yeah.
Right? So insulin just shuttles out a lot of things out of your bloodstream. So you immediately get an effect from the insulin storing everything. But you talked about carbohydrate before you do blueberries. So blueberries increase neurotrophic effects in the brain acutely. Like if you take a bowl of blueberries the night before, you have more neurogenesis the next day, which is why they're so associated with brain health. Neurogenesis produces brain fog. So if you go, it's not just oxidative stress, neurogenesis too. So if you go and take a high dose SSRI, 7 months down the line, when your neurogenesis is high, it doesn't happen immediately, you'll start to notice that if you go on a high dose, you'll get brain fog. You'll feel great, but you'll get brain fog. That's the neurogenesis. If you take cerebrolysin from Cosmic Nootropic, discount code Leo20, by the way. But if you take Cosmic Nootropic, no, I'm not suggesting you do, but I do. If you take it 3 times a week, 1 milliliter before bed, you won't notice much. But if you start taking it every night before bed, you'll start to notice brain fog in the morning. So it also happens from neurogenesis. But let's go through a couple of more interesting aspects of why the ketogenic diet, or why the ketogenic diet, or why fasting in general may improve your concentration in the daytime. So one thing is that the ketogenic diet was created originally by Johns Hopkins University for the treatment of epileptics. Epileptics are people who have seizures thought to be either due to too much glutamate activity, which is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter in the nervous system, or too little GABAergic activity, too little inhibition. So it's been shown that the ketogenic diet increases GABAergic activity. It increases GABAergic activity in the brain in rodents. It increases GABA-A receptor activity, which is the target of benzodiazepines. It also decreases the amount of glutamate put into glutamate vesicles. What are they called? They're called it decreases the amount of vesicular glutamate transporter, the amount that the vesicular glutamate transporter can fill presynaptic vesicles with glutamate. So it decreases the excitatory effects in the brain. So basically, from now, the ketogenic diet inhibits your brain a little bit, lessening that overall just excitement in general, allowing you to a little bit be better able to focus. Now, on some other neurotransmitters, it's been shown, for example, that if you take the adenosine receptors out of rodents, the anticonvulsant effect of the ketogenic diet disappears. So it has some effect on adenosine. Like when you take caffeine in the morning, you might shake because you're blocking your adenosine receptors. So it has some effect on adenosine also. It also obviously has the antioxidant effect, which plays a role. And then it also has an effect on ghrelin, for example. Ghrelin has both attenuates anxiety and can increase amygdala-dependent anxiety in the body. The ketogenic diet in general should decrease ghrelin. Now, obviously, when you're fasting in the morning, you may have higher ghrelin, so this is not impactful. But decreasing ghrelin may decrease the amount of anxiety that people have. This is not totally confirmed because there are multiple effects of ghrelin.
So you're basically insinuating that MK677 has a link to anxiety.
Actually, not insinuating that.
I did an article on that like 2 years ago. Yeah, it's like tied to PTSD in rodents.
Oh, you did an article on it, Derek?
Yeah.
So someone commented on my Instagram like 3 months ago about MK677, saying that it was associated with anxiety, and I was very grateful for him to post that link. I didn't know you did an article on it before.
That's awesome.
That's how I
To
realized.
take it.
Yeah, that's how I learned that the ghrelin. So that's one element, and then the other thing is, for example, heavy carbohydrate meals give you more norepinephrine, serum norepinephrine levels than heavy protein meals or heavy fat meals. So in general, on a ketogenic diet, one would assume you would have slightly lower norepinephrine, noradrenaline levels. So all of these things put you sort of at a less anxious state and with clearer thinking.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I would briefly describe that for you guys.
I find it highly beneficial, but it's for exercise performance, it's not the best thing, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, but for cognition and productivity, it's probably the best diet you can follow.
Yeah.
And even, you know, again, if I eat 5 meals per day with following a ketogenic diet, I don't lose any kind of productivity as long as I get my afternoon nap in around 3 or 4 p.m. Then I'm still productive until 9 p.m. in the evening.
Would you need that nap if you weren't lifting hard, though?
I still need it now. Yeah, I still need it now. Yeah, but it could be also the second.
I can't imagine like stopping my midday, like I'm full bored in work and then going to sleep. There's no fucking way I could do that.
I just feel like I get sleepy and then I go take a nap for 20 minutes and I'm good to go again, you know? So instead of fighting it, I just go take a nap. And I even need it now after three weeks of no training.
Probably due to differences in his nervous system between ours. I've been in that state before also, where I've had to take naps sometimes, and then sometimes I can't imagine taking a nap. You know, it
could also be from the second dose of coffee that I take, because I notice it comes about 2 hours after coffee.
Interesting.
So I have my coffee at 2 and then 4, like it's almost 4 p.m. now here, but I'm fighting through for this podcast.
Okay, briefly about cancer. So, Derek, you were mentioning that. So I researched the subject in quite a bit of detail before. What I was surprised to notice is that overall, more than 60 60% of types of cancers that have been tested with ketogenic diets show that there's an anti-tumor effect of the ketogenic diet and that it delays the progression of the disease. About 15% of the cancers studied, it has a pro-tumor effect in. 15%, so a minority. But the problem is it's not completely defined by the location of the cancer in the body. So there may be certain cancers, there may be two kinds of cancers in the same part of the body, like breast cancer, that may have different genetic issues with them. And one genetically driven cancer could respond well to a ketogenic diet in one area and one other can't. So so the scientists are currently in the process of categorizing each kind of cancer with each genetic predisposition for the cancer or whatever is related, the genetic issue with the cancer, as well as with tumor-related malignancies. So basically, they want to classify each part of the body's cancer with each genetic thing and with other types of it, and then test the ketogenic diet on each, because it's basically a little unpredictable. And at the moment, most of the research is on brain cancers for some reason. I was just looking into this because of Dave, actually, because he had the thyroid cancer, so I wanted to look at it.
Do you have like a running list? I don't know about you guys, but I've had a list Word document for a couple of years now that every time I hear of something odd or promising that's cancer therapy related, I just draw it down and save it. Like, what kind of stuff would you hypothetically do if you got cancer?
Vitamin C treatment. I mean, that's been shown to work in some kinds of cancer, where they do intravenous vitamin C to prevent cancers that use glucose for metabolism, so that it impairs glucose metabolism. Then it's usually done in combination with a ketogenic diet, reducing IGF-1, reducing growth hormone, estrogen positive or estrogen sensitive cancers. You use the Mastrone or the Nolvadex or whatever treatment is out there, or complete castration. It's also being done for cancers. Yeah. So I think it's highly dependent on which cancer you have, on which treatment or proactive approach you need to take, because vitamin C treatment or ketogenic diets don't work for all kinds of cancer. Exactly.
Yeah, same with me. It would depend on I guess if I had a cancer, I would just study that cancer and I would try to find out what kind of cancer I have. But I think a better question is, how am I trying to avoid cancer in general, which I'm not doing right now because of the cheeks. Obviously, I'm potently cancerous at the moment. But in general, I am trying to avoid getting cancer. And I do have an approach to trying to avoid getting cancer, which is basically to try to not consume growth promoting molecules systemically. I try to limit the growth to my brain. I'm not really taking care of my heart that much actively, but I take care of the growth in my brain directly. And then I don't try to use growth promoting stuff for my body in general. For the audience to know, to understand this, basically there's always a trade-off between cancer and growth and brain and heart health. So the more growth promoting molecules you have, sometimes your heart will be in better health than your brain, and you won't get neurodegenerative disease or heart attacks or issues like that, but you also get cancer. So I generally try to minimize the growth in general and just direct it to my brain. And then I have fasts and these fasts which I'm trying to make I'm enhancing the fast to make them more strenuous on myself with rapamycin and with metformin, and in the future with thyroid also.
I would think that GLP-1s, even though they cause insulin release, if somebody, like, there are a lot of people who can't tolerate a multiple day fast because their willpower just is it's just impossible for them. So I think, the little trade-off of the insulin, I think to allow somebody to actually do fast properly, you might be able to, it might make sense for a lot of individuals who want to try and shoot for autophagy, or at least, heal a lot of certain processes that you could otherwise, even like weight loss too, that in itself is going to attenuate a lot of the stuff that might not just be dealt with directly by autophagy. So I don't know, seems like a very multifaceted approach to a bunch of different stuff.
Which is funny. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, it's highly beneficial, especially, during as long as you're taking your food, you're getting your food in, so you don't have to worry about hypoglycemia or insulin release. You should be able to get sufficient amount of appetite suppression and keep your diet model, effective.
Could you safely fast though on a GLP-1 agonist, or are you saying you go hypoglycemic if you use it?
No, you don't. You don't, because the lowest effective dose is enough to prevent reduce appetite, because you already reduce appetite from a ketogenic, the ketosis that you're in while you're fasting.
Well, hypothetically, if you weren't on a keto diet and you just wanted to do a 3-day fast and you were like, oh, I'm going to use a GLP-1 to help me survive it, whereas otherwise a lot of people are going to binge eat in between it. Is that something that would work?
Yeah, of course, because insulin release is still regulated by serum glucose concentrations. So it just enhances insulin release, but it doesn't necessarily cause insulin release. You got to remember that the beta cells of the pancreas even release a unit to, 20 units per day, just normally. Insulin release is continuous, even if you fast.
Insulin's always released, obviously. Yeah.
You know, so it might enhance it a little bit further, but I have not experienced hypoglycemia by fasting, even at 1.2 milligrams of liraglutide. Now I haven't tried 3 milligrams of liraglutide per day because why would I? If I get enough appetite suppression from a low dose.
Yeah, I'm incredibly jealous about this liraglutide that I don't have it right now, and you're talking about it.
Dude, if you see the price in the States, you're going to be even more jealous when you.
That's what I was about to talk. Yeah, I was going to ask you guys.
Fucking ridiculous, dude. Ridiculous.
Oh, okay, so you can't get it from pharmacies here.
No, you can. It's just absurd.
It's too expensive. Yeah.
It's over $1,000.
You can get it covered by insurance, but I don't know if you'd have to show up and have like a wrecked hemoglobin A1C and to get it or something.
I don't think I could do that. I'm already epileptic. I'm too many things. I can't be open.
Scripts are this long, Yeah, it is. I think some of the online pharmacies carry it.
Oh, really?
But the ones that and keep in mind it's still a peptide, so it needs to be shipped, with care. And during COVID, it's shipping with care doesn't exist.
That's true.
Yeah, well, actually, it might take like 3 or 4 weeks before it arrives.
Well, it's funny you guys bring this all up because the whole point of fasting in the first place is because some people can't control their hunger for caloric restriction all year. So then you do the fasting, and then some people can't control their hunger for that, and so now we have the GLP thing.
Well, the fasting. So what I did with myself, the reason why I wanted fasting, because sometimes you get into like an eating disorder, from this cyclic dieting.
No, it's true. True.
You fast you eat super clean for 6 days, and then Sunday you pig out. You do that for a while, you get into this weird eating cycle. So then I found Jason Fung, and I watched some of his seminars. It's like, you know what? Let's give that a try. That was like 3 years ago when I started experimenting with fasting, just to reset my brain so I wouldn't have these stupid cravings. So I always tell my clients that, listen, if you have weird cravings, poor diet model, fasting, if you can survive it, if you have the mental fortitude, it will reprogram your brain so you don't have these cravings. You'll reach like a little bit more homeostasis, whether that's glucose homeostasis or insulin homeostasis. You just reprogram yourself so you don't want to overeat. You don't think about Oreos at the end of the day. This kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So the final
fortitude.
The final thing we wanted to talk about this time was just inflammation and autoimmune diseases. But
so you pretty much cured your Crohn's disease, or like you don't have problems with it now at this point. So I had a few comments that were asking about, like, I don't know, like the only thing I really think of when I think autoimmune disease is do an elimination diet and figure out if there's, something triggering the autoimmune response, and kind of like go from there and kind of, pick it apart until you have a diet model that is sustainable, that doesn't cause a spike in whatever the problem is. But I don't know if that is all you can do. Like obviously there's things that suppress your immune system, which you ideally don't want to be on, I would think. And ideally you'd want to fix it naturally. But like a lot of people have autoimmune problems nowadays. Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, Crohn's, blah, 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 like tons of shit. So obviously, Leo, you have firsthand experience that I feel like would be insightful for the audience, perhaps.
Yeah. So maybe it's useful also to understand what autoimmune diseases are. So in your body, sometimes you have stressors like oxidative stress due to free radicals, or nitrative stress. Or for example, you can have stress in your body due to dysbiosis in your microbiome. Or for example, you exercise. Going and exercising causes oxidative stress, which will also cause brain fog for you guys because of that reason. So you have stressors in your body, and these are responded to by things called pro-inflammatory cytokines that are released by your immune system. The issue becomes when you have consistent chronic stressors that cause a consistent release in inflammatory cytokines. Eventually, sometimes in certain people, this causes dysfunction, where the inflammatory cytokines are no longer treating the stressors, but actually attacking your body. So for example, in arthritis, you may be lifting weights all the time and you might get some kind of oxidative stress on your elbow. Your inflammatory cytokines may be sent out to your joint, and they may damage your joint. That is an autoimmune disease called arthritis. In Crohn's disease, this happens when the microbiome, you have some kind of dysfunction in your microbiome. So for example, in Crohn's disease or colitis, this happens when your microbiome either has pathologic bacteria or they don't have enough food to eat, like fiber. So they may start nipping at your intestinal lining on your intestines, on the wall. The wall actually has a mucus layer. If they get through the mucus layer, they start attacking the actual intestine. This causes inflammatory cytokines in the body to be sent out from the outside to try to defend against these bacteria. So this kind of thing can create Crohn's disease, colitis. For example, if you'll notice if people have psoriasis in a man, you'll notice if you do have psoriasis, you'll get psoriasis more around your beard than around your hair. The reason why, there's more bacteria around your beard than around your hair. Your body senses that bacteria and starts attacking your skin from the outside, and your skin sheds. So basically, it's dysfunction where your body's attacking itself. That's the first thing. The second thing, I've characterized the kinds of them. Oh, also, I'd like to mention anxiety is an autoimmune disease as well. You can have your body's inflammatory cytokines causing you to have an anxiety condition also. Just injecting an animal with inflammatory cytokines will make it anxious. That's one. And I wanted to mention atherosclerosis, which is the deposition of plaque in the arteries, is itself also an autoimmune condition also, because you can have a lot of LDL particles and a low inflammatory condition and may not be deposited into your arteries. But if you're hyperinflammatory, it may be. So that's one thing. The other thing is there are genetics that are relevant. So for example, in terms of atherosclerosis, if you're an ApoE4 allele carrier, ApoE4 is our ancestral variant. It affects basically how vigilant your body is. So it puts your body in a REL-A dominant state. ApoE4 is great if you're a carnivore and you're eating like that guy Sefridge. What's his name? That guy that eats raw meat?
Saladino?
No, not Saladino. Saladino eats meat, but there's a guy who eats raw meat. I'm sure Steve knows him. He has a weird name with a 3. Anyway, someone will comment down below. But if you're one of those guys, it would be great if you have an ApoE4 variant, because it deals with having bacteria, not cooking your food. All that stuff's great. Once humans started cooking their food, we developed the ApoE3 variant 220,000 years ago, and then the ApoE2 variant 80,000 years ago. And these make us less able to defend against bacteria, but also make our body less inflammatory. So these genetics, for example, could cause you to get atherosclerosis. You may have genetic polymorphisms associated with your actual inflammatory cytokines, like in the tumor necrosis factor alpha gene. You may have some associated with Crohn's disease. So you may have individual polymorphisms that make you more susceptible to a certain kind of autoimmune disease. Like, for example, Chris Bumstead has the kidney problem. I have the GI tract. Someone else has his, Dave Palumbo has his shoulders. So we all have different kinds of things that are being attacked. Now, in terms of how your lifestyle can affect it, number one, if you have a high sympathetic nervous drive, everything will be worse. Your nervous system has 2 states. One is the feed or breed one, the parasympathetic. One is the sympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight or flight system. When you take Trenbolone, that gets turned on. The more you're on that sympathetic state, all the inflammation will be worse. That's the first thing I'd want to mention. The androgenic signaling does this too. The second thing is your diet. So for example, your eating window. The smaller your eating window is, your gastrointestinal system will work better. The types of food you eat may affect you also. If you have a GI-related issue, like Derek said, in some kind of elimination diet where you choose individual foods to add into your diet based on how you respond to them. So just a brief side note on this. Why is that important? So our bodies all respond to foods differently. Someone's body may eat some food and think it's a foreign invader and have an inflammatory response to that food. That's an allergy. An allergy is also an autoimmune condition where your body basically haphazardly thinks you're being attacked when you're not being attacked. So elimination diet, diversity in your microbiome. The key is diversity. You can add probiotic supplements, but you don't want one with 2 kinds of bacteria that are in very high amounts. You want to select them very carefully. You want them refrigerated. You want third-party reviewed ones, and you want to take them consistently.
Have you seen that seed probiotic before?
No.
Which one do you take?
I take 5 different brands like VSL and some other ones. They're refrigerated probiotics. I can send you them later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
but some people
interested in that.
Some people put their probiotics into yogurt. They try to ferment, they grow their own. I rely on third-party reviewed companies. These are my most expensive supplements, unfortunately, but they're very useful. So you could do that for your microbiome. If it's about atherosclerosis, you can reduce your saturated fat, your dietary cholesterol, so you can develop less of that. In terms of environmental factors, I should also mention that your inflammation in your body will be affected by that too. So air pollution tremendously affects that and affects your glutathione system. Radiation. So for example, just to give you an example of how much localized radiation may affect you, I live in Irvine right now, but in Los Angeles, there's a high school called the Beverly Hills High School, where the rich kids of LA used to go to in the 90s. A lot of those kids developed cancers because the high school was built on top of some kind of oil well or something like that and had an unusual amount of radiation there. So it's important to take account of environmental factors. For example, my wife is pregnant and I've been trying to consider what environmental factors, including food, my wife's food, may impact the health of my child. And I've discovered that air pollution is one of the strongest associates with, so air pollution.
What do you think about, sorry, before we skip over the radiation stuff, what do you think about things like Bluetooth being on all the time, things like, you know, random electronics that submit signals and stuff? Do you worry about that stuff too, or are you more worried about like blatant dangers?
So the air pollution studies I'm referring to are referring to things like normal air, like dust, carbon dioxide, things like that.
Right. We've talked about like the HEPA filter stuff before, but I'm more referring to like radiation from devices and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So regarding that, I don't know if you ever noticed, I posted a story on Instagram about 5G a couple of months ago and got attacked by followers.
No.
So I posted this story because somebody had messaged me asking, is 5G potentially dangerous? And I just wanted to make clear that nobody knows if it's dangerous or not, and that there are academics who are questioning whether it could potentially be dangerous to us. So I posted a paper, and someone who was actually a good follower, he responded back saying like, the lead author is not a biologist, he's an engineer. There's something wrong with the paper, it's a conspiracy. But it's not necessarily a conspiracy. We actually do not know what these waves do to us. And in fact, for a very long time, scientists thought that the telephone waves and all these things would cause damage. In fact, for a long time, they were wondering why there weren't brain cancers when mobile phones came about. They thought that would happen. So a lot of it is through trial and error. So we really don't know. And I assume that they are causing damage. Yeah. Go ahead,
I wonder how much overlapping effect there is from 5G and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and whatever else and cosmic radiation. I mean, I think people underestimate how much cosmic radiation is actually coming through on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And when there's like a solar storm, it's enough to put whole cities out or whole countries out because it fries the electric system. Nobody ever worries about that, Like
it's a great question, a great topic you bring up about the UV from the sun. Actually, I have some clients now in Australia, and I was talking to them about how the sun damages them there. Hello, Ben, if you're watching this. I was talking to Ben about this. And Ben says that I don't go much out in the sun. And I told him, well, in LA, I feel like the sun is almost as potent. I mean, I haven't been to Australia since I was in my youth, but I feel like LA's sun is not natural. I lived in Dubai for many years, very strong sun. My skin never burnt. In LA, my skin responds weirdly. So I went online, did some research. Turns out in the US, Los Angeles and California have the worst ozone deterioration in the US. And it is really bad. It's really bad. And it's almost comparable to Australia. Yeah. But there's a lot of things in your environment, but back to the root issue. So I tried to give you guys like a top-down view of environment, genetics, different things like that. But let's talk in terms of my own issue, the Crohn's disease. The things that I think, I made a video on this on my channel before, and I wasn't so explicit, but I thought about it much more since then. I think the things that help the most, and I had changed my lifestyle a lot at once, so I wasn't sure what it was. I know that, I made a list. Number one, I know that time-restricted eating had a huge impact. Cutting my eating window down during the day had a massive, massive impact. Changing the foods I ate had a massive impact. In my case, eating grains and sometimes meats also was causing some issues, but I'm not sure entirely what exactly it was in terms of the foods. Fasting, periodic fasting had a huge impact. Every time I do a 4 or 5 day fast before, things would get much better. But it was every month, so I don't know if that was just time passing by. There are two kinds of molecules that help me: free radical scavengers like vitamin C, alpha lipoic acid, NAC, things like that. But then also immunomodulatory molecules like EPA, moringa, sulforaphane, turmeric, garlic, things that make your immune system function a little bit differently, but aren't associated with cancers, like tumor necrosis factor alpha blockers, which are used for Crohn's disease and so on. All the things, almost all the medications used to lower the immune system are associated with cancer, except these, natural molecules. And then in terms of Crohn's disease specifically, having a few probiotic supplements with a variety of bacteria, taking them consistently, and then also taking recently high dose butyrate, which is a fatty acid, has been very helpful. Also,
did you know?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Did you notice that when you came off cycle, that your digestion improved and the status of your Crohn's disease was better under control as well?
In my case, the question was this: I didn't know if going off cycle caused the initial major outbreak of the Crohn's disease.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it happened right after, actually, like 3 or 4 months after.
I thought you had it on cycle as well, because
I thought
a lot of people.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't know what it was. Some people, they're not just, I'm not the type of person that complains a lot. So I would just go into the bathroom and something would happen. It wasn't great, but I wouldn't complain about it, and life would go on. And right. I guess a couple of years went by like that. And then the incident happened after. You were saying a lot of people get that on cycle. They have GI issues.
Yeah, they have digestive issues, and whether that comes from the being in the sympathetic state all the time, especially when you're on Trenbolone, or altering your gut microbiome because some of the steroids are so potent they change your stomach acidity, or the synthetic carrier oils that cause systemic inflammation. I honestly think that it contributes to the digestive issues that some of the people experience on cycle as well. Because now that I didn't inject for 4 months, my digestion is 10 times better also.
Yeah, not just that. I mean, the bodybuilding lifestyle, I believe, especially with steroids, is ideal to create autoimmune diseases, and especially GI diseases. It's like perfect. And I wanted to describe this just for the audience to know. If you're a bodybuilder and you messed up your GI tract so much that you had to get your colon removed or your GI tract removed, like Mandis, for example, there's a coach called Mandis. I have a video about him coming out this week. I call him the praying Mandis. Anyway, Mandis has removed his GI tract. He has a colostomy bag. And, for example, John Meadows, who I respect tremendously, also removed his colon. If you have to remove your GI tract, you have totally failed. Like, you have failed so much at managing your diet. You are so bad at understanding how your body responds to you, because it's like this. Removing your GI tract as a person with a disease like mine, Crohn's disease, which is more major than colitis, by the way. Crohn's is a bigger disease. It's sort of like I'm a diabetic. I don't manage my blood sugar, and then my blood sugar gets stuck in my leg and I cut my leg off. It's like you're totally sloppy. You're totally sloppy. Yeah,
but I think with John Meadows, he experienced a blood clot, and that's why he had to remove part of his colon.
Maybe in John Meadows' case. But anyone with colitis, I do not talk about blood clots. Colitis, if you have colitis or Crohn's disease and you remove your GI tract or your colon, it's because you've allowed your body to attack it so much that it totally destroyed it. In my case,
is it pretty obvious when it's happening? Like, I wouldn't know, but it's totally just like you eat something and then you're just like keeled over pretty much.
No. So the years would go by where you'd be eating and having like diarrhea. You'd always have diarrhea and maybe not have pain. And then you'd have bloating in your midsection because of the dysbiosis. You'd have bloating in your midsection. You'd have a water retention around your midsection. And then you may not notice anything until the pain begins, and then you'll start ignoring it. Keep doing what you're doing, and eventually you'll lose your colon or your GI tract.
Like, what the hardest it is for my clients is when they're on cycle and a little bit higher dosages is to maintain like a flat stomach, right? And we follow a lot of elimination diets, and I always check in. It's like, hey, which food is working, which is not working? Do you get problems later in the day? And then we have to follow all these trial and error situations just to make sure that the waist stays tapered. Because I see it so much with the guys that come to me and their diet is all over the place and they're using all kinds of weird combinations regarding pharmacology. And then it takes them like 3 or 4 months before that waist is under control. Because who wants to come off to get it under control, right?
Yes.
Which in reality, that's probably the best approach to do it. Come off steroids completely, then follow an elimination diet so you know what you can actually eat. And restore your gut microbiome, and then consider another cycle, which is blasphemy, of course, in the fitness industry. But I noticed my digestion is so much better, and it was already improved by following elimination diets, by doing ketogenic diets, by really be really diligent with my food choices. But it's even better following the exact same approach.
it's important for the audience to know that those inflammatory cytokines, when they're attacking your GI tract, you will have that water retention. So it could be the reason for the bloat that you have in your midsection. Absolutely. That's a clear sign. Well, I think this is helpful for people.
What do you think about the carnivore diet? So individuals whose gut microbiome is so compromised that they can only tolerate one food source, and it seems to be red meat. Isn't that kind of weird? Like, why would it just be red meat you can tolerate of all the things?
It seems really convenient, let's say, that the one thing that you happen to tolerate is not green peas. It is actually red meat, which you can survive off. Obviously the carnivore diet, in the diet realm, my opinion, Derek, you and I talk privately about this, and I tell you that I have a feeling that people with mild mental issues hide out in the nutrition wars. So sometimes you'll find people with some issues in the ketogenic world or in the carnivore world, and these are people who are sort of religious. They're religious about their opinions, right? So I think in general, if you were able to avoid GI distress with a carnivore diet, you would probably find at least one more food in the entire world that you could tolerate. There would be one more. It would be like purple radish or something. So thereby it wouldn't be carnivore, and then it wouldn't be so branded, and then it would just be a normal elimination diet and wouldn't be so cool. So, it's just, in my opinion, it's probably a lazy approach. I mean, maybe people respond badly to each other food, but I assume that's not the case, and they just want something to be easy for them to deal with.
Yeah.
How did you feel mentally on carnivore versus keto, Steve?
About the same.
Yeah.
Mentally, exactly the same until I saw my blood work and my total cholesterol was 400.
Yeah.
And then I didn't feel good anymore. Yeah, 400 milligrams.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's on hormone replacement. And my LDL was 270. HDL was 90, I think. Yeah, I discontinued right away. But I'll be honest, like, I was doing a lot of calories, on the carnivore diet. So I wasn't really sure if that is the contributing factor of the dietary cholesterol that was coming from cheese and some butter, just to keep my cholesterol up. So I've seen blood work on other people where the total cholesterol is not that high, like 300, 350, which is still way out
familial
of range.
Hypercholesterolemia. Yeah, that's still familial hypercholesterolemia.
I'm fine, my inflammatory markers are low. Yeah.
So that's how you could qualify for Repatha. It's just a carnivore diet.
Yeah, right.
That's what I was just thinking. Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, just to keto, and it was only after 28 days. I was like, this diet sounds a little bit
serious?
Wishy-washy. So I only do February. I like to do like my monthly experiment. February, only 28 days. 28 days went 400 cholesterol.
Unbelievable.
And I contacted Paul Saladino, who gave me an exorbitant rate. So I was like, okay, I'll resolve this myself by taking the dietary cholesterol out.
Paul is an interesting character. He really strikes me as an interesting person. I would love to talk to him one day and learn more about.
Only talk about consuming testicles.
Yeah, he likes to. It's a weird thing. But the final thing I wanted to mention, Derek, just for your information, when I went on the vertical diet, that destroyed my GI system.
Oh, really?
Very, very quickly. Very quickly.
Like, what part of it though? Like all the rice, or
I think the amount of rice I was eating with meat, the white rice with the meat. For many people with GI issues, white rice will cause them issues. Even though
Which white simple, rice was that? Was that from India or another?
I was
country?
Eating the Japanese one.
Oh, so it was.
In general, the diet is like pretty well tolerated and hits a lot of micronutrient requirements, but if you can't handle the volume of the rice and the red meat, or it skews your lipid biomarkers and whatnot,
it causes severe inflammation for me. I don't know.
I'm
not saying it does for all people at all. I'm just saying for me with the Crohn's thing. So people with GI issues may want to consider it. All right, guys, we covered everything, huh? Oh, sorry.
I think we knocked them all out. And I appreciate you guys knocking out all those topics. I can probably clip them all into their own videos and we can get them fired out here.
Well, that's great. We appreciate, Derek, you spending the time with us. It's very kind of you and generous.
No, like I think this works well. If we can get like this much stuff covered, like I don't have to film tonight now. That's great.
You're only going to get 2 clips from it?
No, I have a lot, dude. I have we talked about trend, we talked about GLP-1, we talked about autoimmune disease, keto, gonadorelin, lots of stuff. I have like 7 videos probably. So.
All right. So nobody's gonna watch the podcast when it's on my channel. Shit.
That's the problem.
We'll put them up. Let's put up the clips on like the first 2 clips we'll put up at the same time as the full video. And then I'll have my clips go out after while the main podcast is already up. And then, you know, if they want to go see the full thing, instead of doing it where it's like my last clip. The only reason last time I waited is because we had that sale and I didn't want people to watch the full thing, be like, oh yeah, exactly. So, and we saw how fast that thing sold out. So I would have got like hundreds of messages.
Yeah, 40
crazy.
minutes. People
were mad at Steve for putting out his discount code.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny.
Yeah, but so by the way, I don't know why so little people viewed it. I don't think it was because all the clips were on yours, Derek. I don't know why. I think maybe because they didn't see the background, so maybe they don't know about our channels, so they didn't see it. That might be why.
Maybe you need to I don't know, maybe differentiate the thumbnail a bit more. I'm not really sure. Maybe I should ask one of my editors to like try their own version and just have it be like drastically different than your other stuff and see if it makes a big difference.
I think a lot of people nowadays, they watch on their phone. And then you don't see all the details, right, in the description section. So they don't understand that, you know, we also have a channel. And, because I see less and less crossover between, like, you get somebody on the podcast and then they go to another channel. I see that less and less because I think most people just watch on their phone and they don't even watch. They just listen as a normal audio
I'm
podcast.
baffled how many people watch on mobile relative to desktop.
I have the same.
I can't do it. I do everything on my computer.
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
Me too.
Can't imagine.
It's like selling yourself short. I don't know why you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Or doing online shopping on your phone. Like, I don't get how everyone does that. It's crazy to me.
My wife is like that. My wife will use her phone for everything. It's
my wife too. Yeah.
I don't like it. Yeah, you can't. I want to see the whole website. You know, I want to get a good idea, top down, bird's eye view.
When you try to get in touch with clients, right? You go through the apps on the phone.
Dude, and you don't realize how bad your website is formatted too until you forget that 70% of your customers are going through the phone. And then you're like, oh shit, I haven't even had my web guy do it for the phone properly. So it's like this giant clusterfuck. And you're wondering why, you know, your site might not convert as well as it should be. You know, it might be because your phone thing isn't set up properly.
The opposite happens to me. My wife figures out the mobile version and leaves the website version. So I go on my computer. I'm like, wait, my website's messed up. She's like, no, it's fine.
That's funny.
All right, guys. Well, I wish you a great night. So, hey, Derek and I have both recorded it. So I guess we have to upload it for Steve, huh?
So I just press stop and then it saves it?
Yeah, once you leave, it'll save it automatically. Just don't escape that. Be saving it on your phone.
Like I press stop before leave, right? I'm just making sure.
No, when you end the conversation,
it'll automatically. You don't need to stop.
Just don't close that, and I'll upload mine. So if you guys could both share your recording, then I'll splice that all together, and then I'll take my video, your video, and everybody's video, and the best audio I could get in this group, and then make it look as professional as possible for the guys that watch on their mobile phone.
Yeah, Steve, what I'll do is right after we get out, I'll upload, once it's done downloading, I'll upload it to the same Dropbox folder. I'll send you the link. And Thanks. Derek, I'll send you both the link.
Yeah.
And that should work out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Talk soon, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good evening.
Have a good day.